Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome back to some more StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Today I want to be showing you a game that I played last night, and this is going to be a Zerg vs Protoss where I fall very far behind. But I do want to spoil the end result for you. I end up winning the game. And what I primarily want to be talking about here, because I actually wanted to leave this game as well, and I'll show you the moment where I wanted to do that, but I wanted to leave the game, but then I was like, I may as well just give it a try. I may as well just cross my fingers, hope it works out, and maybe we can still squeeze out the victory. So that's what I want to be talking about primarily today. But I also want to be showing you the rest of the game, as I do make plenty of mistakes. I scout the information, but I don't really know exactly where to place it. And I end up reading the information that I have poorly, resulting in me getting very far behind. So today I want to be discussing, how to, first and foremost, prevent the aggression that took me took me so much damage earlier, and then also how you can potentially come back in the Zerg vs Protoss matchup, because there are a couple of ways to do so. Now this is also a very common thing that I get a lot of questions about. My opponent decides to put down a pylon in my natural. Now, a lot of people get a little bit confused about this. They get a little bit upset when the Protoss player puts down this pylon right there, because it prevents them from the strategy that they wanted to go for. Now, what I did here is just immediately add on the gas geyser and add on the spawning pool. If you can just make a couple of zerglings, take out the pylon here as well, you're gonna be a-okay. Now, if you're feeling comfortable with your control, you can definitely also take the third base, which is exactly what I ended up doing. But it's important to realize that if the Protoss player decides to go for like a pylon in your natural, that immediately means as well that they are invested in that, and with that they're delaying their own usually like their cybernetics core, and therefore Twilight Council, Stargate, robotics facility. They delay pretty much everything that they wanted to go for just by putting up that one pylon. So if you respond cleverly enough and you respond fast enough by just simply getting those extra gases, as well as the zergling speed and the spawning boost or the spawning pool, generally speaking, you're actually going to be the one that gets ahead out of that equation. Now, I did go for the third base follow-up, as I'm not really too worried about the whole control here whatsoever. But now that I know that my opponent did go for a quick second base, I decide to go for the natural myself as well. So I'm getting a couple of zerglings here just to make sure that everything is going on. Now, it is pretty important to note here, and he does actually end up, not having that pylon there anymore. But it is important to note that I'm trying to position my overlords here in places where I can scout as much as I possibly can, okay? So I want to be flying them in a little bit later. Now, on top of that, I'm using the zerglings that I have right from the get-go to scout about and see if I can find the probe. And this turns out to be a little bit of an issue. I'm looking around with the zerglings here initially, and I'm checking the different corners of the map, but if you take a quick little look at the minimap here, we find that the probe that was actually building that pylon in my natural has made his way all the way towards the top left side of the map, and it will end up being rather annoying for me. Now, the very first thing that I should have done here 100% of the time, knowing that there was potentially going to be a probe out on the map, I should have just been rallying zerglings across. I mean, to be completely honest with you, you will see very shortly the tech choice that my opponent will be going for, but you can already guess by seeing the Twilight Council. To be completely honest with you, this was an extremely easy thing to scout. I mean, it's one of those things that can easily catch you off guard, but it's also one of those things that can easily be prevented. So I'm running around here, I'm flying in my overlords, I'm checking out what's going on, I'm seeing that there's more gases. Don't actually know if I end up using this one. No, I actually run in zerglings instead, and I scout the information here, okay? So I get in here with zerglings, I get in here with an overlord, and this is all that I see. Now, if we try and add one and one together, right? If we can combine the information of what we right now know in the game, it is pretty clear that my opponent really has a handful of options, but all of them are gonna be proxied. I mean, if at 3 minutes and 48 seconds, say like 3.5, 4 minutes, you don't see any tech choice by your opponent, he's either going for an extremely greedy third base, which I will be checking very shortly, or he is doing something cheeky. Now, in this particular case, I'm looking around all over the base, and I just simply can't find anything. So, at this point, I should be responding accordingly. At this point, I should be aware of the fact that there is a big chance that my opponent is going to be going for at least a little bit of aggression. In particular, when I scout that the third base is not going to be located. Now, to be completely honest with you though, if I'm being very strict to myself, I should have never even let it allow, or like, I should have never even allowed it to get to this point at all. I should have just been able to scout this right from the get-go here, and I should have just ran a zergling across the map to check out whether or not there was going to be any proxies, because I did not know whether or not that probe went home, and I did know that I did not kill it. So in the end, I see that my opponent goes for the 4-minute and 30-second expansion, but I still have not seen his tech of choice. Now, just to give you a number, if my opponent would have been gone for example, an Oracle proxy, which is extremely common, generally speaking, that Oracle will come on your side of the map around 4 minutes into the game. So if I combine all the information that I have right now, right? He's going for a relatively late third base. I did not see any tech in his bases whatsoever. I got a full scout off on those. I only saw 2 gas geysers, and it's not gonna be a starport. If I would combine that information together, even though I don't exactly know what's going on, I can narrow it down. I can, like, you know, think of the list of builds that Protoss has, and I can just decide at that point that it's extremely likely that he is indeed going for a bunch of Dark Templar, and it turns out to be the case. Now, obviously, when you're in the middle of the game, those kind of moves and those kind of decisions are very difficult to make, right? Like, they're very, very difficult to make, as you simply have to do so many other things while you're always also, yeah, you know, working on an actual macro aspect. So I'm scouting about here, I'm trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And I very quickly find out that my opponent did indeed end up going for a bunch of the Dark Templar. And at this point in the game, since he has his third base up, I simply did not make any army whatsoever. I got a couple of Zerglings. Yeah, those are the only 2 Zerglings that I have here in total. And at the same rate, my opponent did decide to go for a bunch of Adept. Now, the reason why he's making those Adept, by the way, is just sort of to pressure me. To make sure that, you know, he's just dealing a little bit more work. But at the same time, he's already got Dark Templar, or at the very least, he's already got his Dark Shrine finished up. And he's actually got the Dark Templar right now at the same rate in my third base. He's doing a little bit of work with that, while he's also pressuring with the 4 Adepts that he made earlier. And I'm going to be capable of cleaning up the Adepts just fine with minimal losses. But at the same time, there's a bunch of Dark Templar in my third base going to town. And while I definitely did not respond nearly as fast as I should have, because I was busy cleaning up the Adepts, my opponent gets a very, very solid advantage. And those 3 Dark Templar end up doing a significant amount of damage. Not only did he end up killing 22 workers right here in the game, I also lost my third base, while I know that my opponent does have the third base himself. So at this point in time, I definitely know that I'm going to be very far behind. And this is the first moment where I contemplate leaving the game. This is the first moment where I'm like, alright, well, this is still relatively early on into me starting up the live stream, and this was indeed played on the live stream. And generally speaking, I want to be playing straight video games for about 4 hours or so. So if I spend a lot of time, you know, just dwelling on a loss, generally speaking, it's not going to be the healthiest of decisions for me. But now I finally do find in the top left corner of the map that my opponent did indeed go for the Dark Shrine with the proxy. And I could have just added 2 and 2 together and just, you know, simply calculated the option that he was going for this exact build right here. Now, I did see that he tried sneaking something away just a little bit, but there's just more and more aggression coming my way. And at this point in the game, I'm just already a little bit frustrated. But this is not really where I want to be leaving just yet. Now, the way I'm trying to come back from this is by banking on my upgrades. So I've got a whole bunch of whole lots of drones that I actually got made, and I'm gonna be transferring those over. But I know that I got my +1/+1 upgrades here already done. On top of that, I'm still trying to immediately tech up to +2/+2, and the reason for that is that it's going to be helping me potentially secure an advantage later on into the game, right? If I don't have the tech advantage, if I don't have the economy advantage, the only thing that I can hope for really is to get a really big engagement off, and then I just barely take that, I counterattack and clear out the advantage, or, you know, walk onto the advantage. And the way that I can do so is by just simply pushing with a really big army that is really well upgraded. Now, at this point in the game, I do want to make sure that I get back to an amount of workers where I can actually produce a proper Hydralisk army with. But as you can see, I do also have +2/+2 on the way. Now, worker-wise, I did manage to catch up in that regard once again, but you gotta keep in mind that for the majority of the time here, he's already had a significant amount of workers that were mining compared to my own, right? So I'm gonna have to make a decision here very shortly. I do want to move across the map very, very soon when my upgrades finish up, but I know at that point that there is a very big chance he's going to be able to hold it. I mean, attacking into a Protoss player's base is generally speaking already pretty difficult, especially when they have like photon overcharge and cannons and all that available. But I don't really have much of an option here. So I decide to go for my Lurker Den here. I'll knock down the rocks here because I'm not entirely sure what I want to go for. Then I decide to start moving across the map by knocking down these rocks leading to our bases. As you can see, still making non-stop army, still hoping that my opponent is gonna take a fort base, and I do find out right now that he did indeed add a fort base on, so I can really try and take the advantage when I push with the +2/+2 upgrades. Now, I know very well that economically speaking and army size wise, I'm probably not gonna be ahead, but as long as I get a reasonable engagement, there's actually a chance that I will still be able to take this. But keep in mind, imagine I would have been in this exact same scenario, and I'm forced to turn around here, but imagine I would have been in this exact same scenario without losing the third base, right? You can imagine I'd be at like 180 supply at the very least, right? I'd be very close to being maxed out. So I'm just simply trying to clean up whatever I can, and this is actually a nice little pickup for me, because I did still have some time before my upgrades needed to finish up, and I didn't really end up losing any workers here either way, and you can see the supply count actually does go in my favor once again. It's just, I guess, a little bit of a macro advantage, but either way, like, I really need to make sure I get an engagement going here shortly. Now, my opponent is moving across the map here, which is perfect for me. Right? I got my +2/+2 done. I know that my upgrades are going to be powerful, and I know very well that it's going to be a little bit scary, but there's also these balls of doom, and I need to try my very best to micro against that. Off creep, very, very difficult. Pushing in, sniping the mothership core to try and prevent him from moving back home, and at this point, I do have a pretty suitable army. But more and more disruptors are joining the fray, and I'm a little bit worried about this shenanigans here. I know he's got a fort base up, I know that I am lacking a fort base, and I needed to do more damage than I did just now. Well, some of you may look at this fight and be like, alright, hey, he's in a good spot, right? No, I'm really not. If you think about Zerg as the race that always needs to be one base ahead, that means that if you're in even bases, you're gonna generally speaking already be behind, and if your opponent has an extra base on top of yours, you're gonna be in a really terrible position unless you have the plentiful army to finish him off, and at this point, I don't think I'm gonna be capable of doing that. So I got a bunch of lurker here, trying to obviously split up so I don't lose them to the disruptor. The disruptor do need 2 hits before they end up dying here, and we're gonna try and start slow pushing here. I'm trying to slow push to be as smart about this engagement as possible, but there's just so much ground army. Plus I know that he's got the fort base secured that I really need to try and pull something off here. But if you look at his army count, I don't feel like it's gonna happen. Once again, couple of disruptors cleaning up a little chunk of my army, but it slowly but surely whittles me down. Now, to be fair though, I got a reasonable army supply here. I once again have a little bit of an upper hand as far as the micro goes there on the mothership core, but I end up losing a big chunk of my Hydra army now that the disruptors are allowed to really connect with my stuff, and at this point, I'm feeling pretty terrible, and here is where I, for real, for the first time for real, contemplate leaving the game. Now, I'm sure many of you have been in this exact same scenario, right? Where you're going up against a Protoss, you know it's 4 base versus 4 base technically. I mean, I got a 4 base here, but I mean, mine isn't even done yet. We're in a terrible place. The only thing I got going for me is upgrades, and I know very well that if my opponent pushes out in the next couple of minutes, if he just keeps on moving in more and more army supply here, I'm gonna be in a terrible position, and there's a very, very small chance that I'll actually be able to win. Now, let's say another 5 minutes go by, right? Let's say I've somehow, some way managed to keep my opponent back in his base for a significant amount of time, and he somehow, some way does not move out across the map, which is, once again, a bit of a slim option, right? Let's say that happens. Well, in all honesty, if you are in this scenario, right, where you know you're gonna be losing if your opponent just simply moves across the map, you have one great option that works almost every time for me, and that is to go straight into Mutalisks. Now, you're gonna need at least 8 gas for this. You're gonna have to make sure you get as many gas geysers as possible, because you need to ideally produce only Mutalisk and to simply just never engage his army ever again. Now, here's the idea, right? If we get a lot of Mutalisk out, we're gonna be extremely mobile, and we're gonna be able to run our opponent around for a very long amount of time. However, generally speaking, Mutalisks are easily countered by things such as Archon, such as, you know, Stalker, Phoenix, all that shenanigans. So generally speaking, you're gonna not engage the Protoss anymore. So, since I right now am fully aware of the fact that I'm not gonna be able to take out his army anymore in a straight up engagement, I need to sort of put all of my eggs in one basket and just simply go for a one-time push. And I decide to, right here, put down the Spire. Now, supply-wise, income-wise, tech-wise, everything-wise, it looks pretty terrible. But I know that my opponent is going for an army that counters the standard transition from their lurker shenanigans, and that is going to be the Mutalisks. So, here's my plan. if my opponent moves out across the map in the next couple of minutes, I know that I'm gonna be losing the game, right? If he moves out right now, I mean, I'm pretty much dead. I'm pretty much dead. But what I can try and do is move across the map here with the little army that I have and just sort of posture. I want him to know that I'm on his side of the map so he doesn't move out. I want to be threatening the Zerglings consistently. I want to make sure that I got as much pressure on my opponent here so he gives me the time that I need. I got 8 gas geysers right now, or at the very least I'm finishing up my 7th and my 8th right now. And I need to make sure that I wait as long as we possibly can before engaging this opponent, right? On top of that, I want to try and see if I can, you know, just play very, very defensively. And once again, right, I know right now where his army is going to be located, and we're still threatening the run by. Now, just look at the supply, right? Look at the supply that we have at this point in the game. I mean, it's literally 98 for me, 150 for his, and army count or army supply wise, look at this. This is stupidly in favor of the Protoss. But the thing is, the Protoss doesn't know. He just sees me poking with a handful of Zerglings, and that makes him assume that I got like a big chunk of my army somewhere over here as well, which is the only reason why the Mothership Core is being left behind. He doesn't know that I don't have anything here anymore, right? So at the same time, since he knows that a chunk of my army is going to be located over here, and a chunk of it will probably be over here, he's going to be pushing me in the main base. Now, I don't have anything, so I'm desperately trying to hold on to the bases that I have, so I'm just going to start adding on a bunch more Zerglings. But once again, I split up my army here, but not with all of it. I'm using the Zerglings that I have, at least a handful of them, to keep on threatening the run by. And this is where I start adding in the mutas. Now, I obviously don't want to show the mutas if I cannot or avoid that, so I'm just trying to clean up whatever I can. Now, still at this point in the game, I know fully well if my opponent moves out, I'm dead. But if I manage to somehow, some way slow him down with advancing, by just simply cleaning up these drops, by just simply making sure he doesn't max out too soon, by simply just pressuring his army to the best of my abilities and making him think my army is bigger than it is, I may very well be able to pick this one up. Now, once again, right, I see that the army has arrived at my doorstep. So here's the idea. Like I said, I don't think I can take out his army in a one-on-one engagement. As a matter of fact, I know for real here that there is no way I'm going to be taking out the army with the supply that I currently have. So what do I do instead? I'm going to go for the counterattack. Now, truth be told, I think if my opponent would continue pushing here, he would not be capable, or I would not be capable of winning. However, you gotta keep in mind that he doesn't know how much army I exactly have and whether or not I still got some hidden bases. I mean, if you look at his scouting so far, Protoss, generally speaking, don't check this chunk of bases, and for all he knows, he's assuming I got all of those bases in the top left side of the map taken, right? So he's forced to basically move back, because if, let's say, he would go for the counterattack right now, it could very well be that he cleans up my natural, cleans up my main base, my third base, and all this corner over here, but it could very well be the case that I got all of these bases over here as well. And because he isn't for certain and he wants to max out his army before that happens, he is gonna be holding back once again. And here's the strategy, right? I'm just trying to simply max out on Mutalisks. I'm just trying to get as maximum value out of my mutas, but once again, I don't want to be engaging this army. If he decides to move out across the map, that's great, because I'm just simply gonna counterattack every single time. Now, obviously, there's like a sweet spot of mutas as well, where you can actually just simply win the engagement just because your opponent doesn't have enough army to properly supply, you know, the counter anymore. Like sometimes, for example, in this particular case as well, like he's focusing really heavily into Immortal. But look at the minimap, right? I know exactly where my opponent army is going to be located. I don't want to be engaging it. I don't want to be engaging it. I'm just simply going for the counterattack while still producing more and more units here that's gonna be, or that are gonna be good at the counterattack shenanigans. Now, I'm flying my mutas into the main base to try and pressure several places at once while leaving my Zerglings towards the third base. Now, I know very well that that wasn't going to be achieving all too much, but I do get a huge amount of worker kills here in the main base. He's also going for the warp in right now with stalkers right underneath my mutas. Now, at some point, you get a plentiful amount of Mutalisks to basically start one-shotting whatever you have. And, you know, at this point in the game, I got such a nice group of Mutalisks because of the 8 gases that I have and because of my opponent's lack of scouting and recognizing what the scenario was going to be like, that I am basically going to be capable of taking out whatever my opponent has. Now, I still have to watch out for Archon. They do splash damage in a very small radius, so they could potentially still take all of this out. But at this point in the game, I'm very happy about the scenario. I start sniping the cybernetics core, so there's gonna be no more stalker warp in here. and I am just trying to pick up the victory here while being a little bit cheeky. So long story short, if you can somehow, some way manage to get your opponent stuck on a handful of bases, right, and you make it so that he doesn't move out across the map, even though you know fully well that if you would lose the game, but if you somehow, some way manage to keep him back by just simply counterattacking and pretending your army is big enough to actually take him on, oftentimes you can tech up to mutas, and once you get a full stack of mutalisk out, all of a sudden, it's very, very easy to pick up the victory. So a little bit of a cheeky game. I hope some of you learned something from this, at the very least gave you some ideas to play when you are indeed behind in the Zerg versus Protoss matchup. And other than that, I do want to thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.